Don't get anything as robotic as that from Tobias Elwood. Dewey is with us now. Good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Wanted to talk to you after hearing what the director of GCHQ said yesterday about the threats particularly from China, and how much we need to worry about it.
Yeah, well, China is watching what's going on in Ukraine very, very carefully indeed. I mean, the unthinkable has happened. We've seen the Ukrainians, with the support of British weapon systems and Americans, actually push back the third largest army in the world. And now there's big questions as to what Putin may do. Might he use a nuclear weapon? What will we do to actually bolster our support to Ukraine during this difficult and dark chapter that we've now entered? So what's happening with China, as the head of GCHQ was saying, that's the long geopolitical threat in the longer term. In our lifetimes, China will become bigger and more bolder in technological, military and economic sense. How are we going to manage that transition? How are we going to make sure we include China in the future? Because at the moment, there is, I think, a splinter between where China and Russia wants to go in interpreting our international rules-based order and where the rest of us want to go. And I think we've lost that appetite, that determination to defend what is important to us.
OK, when we're talking about Ukraine, we had a couple of guests on yesterday and they were saying we are running out of our own supplies of armoury to give to Ukraine, so we're buying stuff off the shelf in order to give to them. And as a result, we need to rethink the way we approach war in this country. Europe has been peaceful since 1945, more or less, and it isn't anymore. And going forward, we need to reevaluate how we view war.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we've enjoyed a relative peace over the last 30 years. We've had the problems of terrorism, but ultimately state-on-state aggression hasn't really taken place, and we've become a little bit complacent. So all our own stocks, our cupboards are now becoming increasingly bare. It takes time to procure some of these weapon systems. They need microchips, they need, supply chains to come in. And if we've gifted all of these, quite rightly, to the Ukrainians, then how are we going to provide those own defences ourselves? The Prime Minister has said that she's going to provide a review of the integrated review of our defence posture. That must include our own procurement, our own supply chains, to make sure that we can actually provide the defences that we require.
Do we need to increase our spending? And we are already, the Prime Minister's already committed to 3% of GDP, hasn't she? But does that need to be even higher? It
does indeed, if we want to play a role in protecting our world, which is becoming, as I say, increasingly dangerous. It isn't just what's going on with Russia and Eastern Europe and where China may go, becoming ever dominant in the South China Sea. It's also what's happening in Iran as well. Our world, if you like, is unravelling a little bit. Globalisation is being tested. Therefore, we need, if we want to defend our own economy, we need to increase our defence spending as well. We don't make the correlation between a strong economy, prosperity, and the strength on our defence as well. What's going on with food prices here, inflation, is directly linked to Odessa. So you need a navy there if you're going to provide a maritime force, for example, in the Black Sea to protect those grain ships coming out that we've spoken about in the past.
Our spy chief also talked about China potentially owning space and the threat that involved. I know you've written about this before.
Yeah. Well, the space is one of those things that we just simply take for granted. Every time we buy a cup of coffee in Costa Cafe, 3 satellites are used because when you ping your card, your electronic card, the timing of it, because there are atomic clocks in these satellites, it's absolutely critical for our finances. It's critical for our military weapon systems to find their targeting and so on. If you take out these systems, suddenly we become blind. We're not able to communicate. And China has got their own system, the Beidou system. And they're now encouraging more and more countries, as I understand the head of GCHQ was saying, to move over to their system, their competitive system. And that goes back to my point that the world slowly, progressively, is splintering into 2 dangerously competing spheres of influence.
But if they do find themselves in a position where, I'm guessing it's not tomorrow or the next day, but not too far away, they can be in charge. They're controlling space, and what does that mean for potential missiles being fired from one part of the globe to the other?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, if you go back to the Second World War and the Battle of Britain, it was all about who governed the space above. If you govern the high ground, if you like, then you can actually dominate what goes on beneath. Now, the high ground has moved to space. And they've now got satellites that can actually orbit satellites. They've got dual-purpose satellites that can send infrared and fry another satellite, and it's all OK corral up there. We're not able to monitor it in the way that we should be. So absolutely right. In the last integrated review, one of the big challenges was we poured more money into that, but we didn't increase the budget, and that's why we saw reductions in our armed forces, in the Army, Navy and Air Force. So it is getting more dangerous out there, and space is absolutely critical.
So what do we need to do?
Well, we need to invest. We first of all need to do a reassessment of where the threats are coming from, and then what we want to do to make sure not only we defend ourselves, but how we work with allies. And I think that's the big question, because collectively we are stronger than China. Collectively we are stronger than Russia. But still, we've left Ukraine to do all the fighting, for example. NATO has been sitting on its hands. We need to be a bit more robust, determined to be able to use our hard power to defend what we believe in.
We know why that is, NATO would say, but we'll come on to that another time. Before I let you go, though, I want to talk to you briefly, if I may, about it being quite a difficult day for you today.
Yeah, I'm just appreciating that it's now 20 years since the Bali bombing, when another form of threat sort of burst into our lives after 9/11. So yes, it's 20 years since, very sadly, I lost my brother. He was killed in that attack, senseless attack on his innocent people. He was a teacher in Vietnam, the deputy head teacher of that school, and targeted not because of who he was, but simply was a pawn caught up in a huge atrocity, a different form of warfare where people were willing to take their lives. And I don't think we've still answered that question, as how you prevent somebody from being radicalised and wanting to then actually kill themselves, thinking they're going to be rewarded with a fast track to paradise.
What have we learned since you lost your brother as far as those sort of attacks are concerned?
Well, personally, every day doesn't change. The pain is still there. It just feels different. I think that as I say, I don't think we've really got an answer to it. Worryingly, in Afghanistan, for example, the Taliban we have taken over. We handed back the country to the insurgency, but it isn't the Taliban. It's ISIS-K that's now developing there. So this threat hasn't got away, and it's important that, again, we invest in organisations such as GCHQ to make sure that we stay as safe as possible.
It's always great to see you, Tobias. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.